Please put your hands together for the Head of Digital Security and Compliance, Robert Wennberg.
Thank you so much. All righty. So, just first a quick disclaimer. I will be taking this in English for the interest of our friends at Integrity360. But before we do that, safety first. It's number one priority for us at Alleima, and we don't need any protective equipment in these premises. The emergency number in Sweden is 112, and the emergency exits, if you have noticed, it's one over there, it's one over there, there is one behind the curtain over there, and one over there. When you come out in the corridor, you can either take right and then direct left, or you can go out to where our friends Fortinet and Rapid7 were standing and evacuate that way. There are no scheduled alarm drills today, so if the alarm goes, we will evacuate. And when we have evacuated the building, what we need to think about is that we will, the assembly point is on the southern part of Brunkebergstorg. So, Robert Wennberg is my name. I started at Alleima in 2008. And an interesting thing was that I thought that this entire journey would be just to take us through the Lehman Brothers crisis. As you remember, that was in 2008. And in this presentation, I will take you on a journey using history. We will start with how steel was first produced. We're going to go through how Alleima came into the picture, disrupting the steel industry, and then how it was spun off from Sandvik into our own independent listed company. Finally, I will go through how we set up the digital security department at Alleima. The hammer and the anvil. It's almost 4,000 years ago where the bloomeries at the time started to get hot enough so that steel could be produced. It was actually in Anatolia, what is now Turkey, where this invention actually came to be. And there are two ways of making steel, or at least it was at the time. The bloomeries, which was a precursor of the blast furnaces that are still used today, and the crucibles, these little ceramic containers that also are used for making, for example, Wood's steel or real Damascus steel. But after that process was done, what you need to do is you need to bring in the blood, sweat, and tears of the blacksmith. You need the muscle power, and you need to hammer the coal out of the steel. That was up until one day in 1862 when Göran Fredrik Göransson, just outside of Sandviken in Gästrikland, he got a failed patent to work. The company got bankrupt almost a couple of times. But you see behind me here, you see the Bessemer reactor, where the principle is that you blow compressed air into the molten pig iron, thereby reducing the steel. And what you can see also on the photo here, you see the gentleman working there. That's 50 years later, so it's 1808. And it was quite an interesting journey indeed that they did. What I think is important is that this is one of the oldest disruptions that I know about. And here you see one of the things, whereby Sandvik disrupted the business. The gentlemen there, they are holding up strip steel that was used for conveyor belts. And they were able to do this on a price point that no one could match. Another early product we did was steel rings for the steam locomotives of the world. You know, the wheels were made of cast iron. When they hit the brakes, the result was that the wheel weren't round anymore. You created a flat surface. Brake a couple of times, and you are not having a round wheel anymore. You will have a multifaceted geometry shape. That increased wear and tear. It broke down the engines. So what we did then, or our ancestors, I guess, we sold steel rings that you put outside from the high quality steel that Sandvik and Wennberg was doing at the time. And we could then alleviate the wear on the steam engines. And another very interesting thing that I think was a bit ahead of its time was that we also priced it not on what it costed us to make it, but what we saved for the customer. And our friends out there that works with sales, they say that that is a dream scenario. Not that I'm a salesperson, but anyways. But at the end of the day, the industry was disrupted. This is a very long slide. I don't want you to read it all, and I will not touch on all of these things, but you can see there, 1921, I think is one of the interesting points here. We started mass production of stainless steel. But what's even more interesting there, that we started using scrap steel as the input. We did not use the normal process of a bloomery, or its more modern version, a blast furnace or a crucible. We used scrap steel, and we added the alloys that we needed to achieve the kind of metal that we wanted. Another thing that you can see here also is that we have many acquisitions. And that is also quite interesting, because since we try to be the best in the world on what we're doing, if you cannot beat them, you're going to have to make them join you. And this brings us to the point of what Alleima is today. Just because I'm pretty sure, first I was thinking that I would ask you if you heard about Alleima. I name dropped Sandvik a couple of times, and what Alleima really is the start, the foundation, the core of Sandvik. Before Sandvik acquired the machining solutions part and the rock, the drill and the mining equipments. So that is what Alleima is. That part was spun off from Sandvik and is now its independent company. And then what do we do? As you see, it's a premium offering. We do tubes quite a lot, bars and billets. Heating technology is extremely important for us, and those of you that heard about H2 stainless steel up there in northern Sweden, they are going to use our electrical heaters to heat the hydrogen to make that process work. You also see medical wire. It's a super important thing. And also quite interesting, because you may have seen the YouTube video where this patient with Parkinson is using cannabis, and all of a sudden the shaking go away. And I mean, that's really is an eye-opener. The thing is, with the products that we are making, our customers are able to reproduce the effect of removing the shaking without the intoxication. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I guess it depends. Oops. One too much. And as you can see here as well, it's quite a number of segments that we support. I think transportation is interesting. Your car, the fuel direct injection lines, probably made with our steel. If you flew here with an airplane, you're probably going to have the tubes from our mills in Kennevik or Tübingen. And also, those of you that shave regularly, Wilkinson Sword and Gillette are big customers of ours. And not to forget the power generation. With the new small modular reactor segment of nuclear power plants coming up, we are there with our friends, our customers that do that and are helping them with that as well. So we have the three divisions, as you can see. We have tube, Kanthal, which is a heating system, and you have strip. And you can also see on the market share that we are number one. And we're almost done with the sales pitch for Alleima that our communications department asked me to do. But you can still see that we are a quite global company. We're around a bit over 7,000 employees, and if you count consultants, we're nearing up to 8,000. We operate in many markets, almost all continents of the world. And the sun rises in Kobe, in Japan, and it sets in Kennewick, up in state of Washington, in the US for Alleima. Now, a bit more interesting, since most of us here are IT people after all, is a transformation project that we did, taking us from being 4 people working with IT, at least group IT in Alleima, into the 82 people team that we are right now, which is of course very much augmented by operational service suppliers. And Verbier, by the way, that was only the code name of the project, because when this was starting, when the precursor work was started for Verbier, it was actually called, the first project back in 2014 was called Veil. The second one was Trysil, and then come Verbier. And I guess now you can see the theme here. It was the M&A project manager running this, and he named all of his projects after skiing resorts. Yeah. So the business area of Sandvik Materials Technology, was to be turned into Alleima, an independently listed company, and Verbier was the project name for that endeavor. I don't think we should talk too much of this picture from a detailed point of view. After all, it is quite complex, but I used it here as an illustration. And what I think is fun with this, or interesting, are the blue things there. That's the receiving organization, and the black things are the project that enacted the change. And as you can see, it's quite a big project team made up of skilled consultants that were helping us. Also, there is a matrix organization with some parts of this enabling the capabilities. And the time planning is even more complex, so this is even more of an illustrative picture, but it's actually true, and I anonymized this one and the other one quite a lot. And you can see there to the left that it's starting with pure infrastructure stuff. So one of their, create a new AD environment. And then it's resource and user provisioning. The workforce suite, new network, and so on. And then every project stream tagged along. And over there, all the way to the right, you can see the listing. And it said the assumed listing, but it was actually the listing that we did. So on August the 31st, 2022, Alleima was listed at Stockholm Nasdaq. So as you can see, it's quite a long project, or detailed project. Now, why did it go so well? What were the root causes? And I guess this is a key takeaway of this part of the presentation. It was the very top-level message from the management. Verbier is run on time. Time was the most priority. If you know the trinity of time, cost, and quality, time was number one. Quality was number two, and cost was number three. I've never ever been in a project like that, but I guess it is what it is when you need to meet the deadline and to achieve the goal set up by the shareholders at Sandvik. Collaboration and flexibility. Of course, in a project such as this, it's always going to be some conflict, not intentionally, but there will be some friction. Timelines will be pushed, they will be challenged, people will push at each other. Why should we have this EDR solution? Why cannot we have this one? You're making it harder for us by you doing this. Why are you not doing that? Network segmentation, do we really need that? Maybe we can just have the clients on the same network as everything else. Isn't that easier? It's quick. We meet the time. And that was one of the things, we need to be flexible on one side, but we need to make informed decisions. Another thing was that the high quality of the original plan. I mean, it wasn't perfect, and it changed, but not to a very great extent. So a good planning was actually quite a big part of the success. And then the last thing was to balance the separation, to take a workload, to simplify a bit, take a workload from the Sandvik side, drag it through our next generation very big firewall over to the Alleima side, and spin it up there and get it working in the new infrastructure. And at the same time as we were doing that, we were building up the line organization, taking us from the 4 people that we started with over to the 82 that we are today, getting all the operational contracts in place. And here, if we look at the lessons learned, because as I said, everything weren't perfect, we couldn't really be telepathic and influence everyone and see into the future. So when it comes to the point of planning and the startup phase, understanding of the current state, what is actually the real IT environment of SMT? That was something that could have been a bit more defined and known, that could have changed the sequencing of things, because as you saw on the time plan earlier, it was a sequence, it was really good, but it wasn't perfect. Spending some time there to make it more correct would have helped a lot. And the underestimated areas that we had, separating the OT from the IT. I guess you never heard that, right? And like Emil was talking about earlier, we are more afraid of doing things in OT, because if we have a Windows computer that supports a PLC, that holds a big ladle of molten iron, several tons, 1,500 degrees hot, you cannot maybe contain that. You need to talk to the people running the process. The other thing when it comes to resources, first of all, when you take in a consultant to a company such as this, the onboarding needs to include the actual culture of the company. And what you also need to be mindful about is the silo thinking. Since time was the #1 priority, each delivery function, they were focusing on what they were doing first. And that is very natural and logical, but you need to think about that so you can move on in a good way. Project and program management, I mean, that should, to try and break the silos, to be able to be more flexible, to re-architect the project in small pieces, to try and move parts of the time plan, that could also have helped a lot. When it comes to country and division IT, it's a bit of a strange name of that part of this, but we did it in the middle of COVID. We couldn't travel anywhere, and the business was still running. So we worked a lot with teams, and we didn't even know each other because the IT organization was also being built up out in the countries. So it was a bit tricky, but we did it. And finally, communication. Balancing communicating too much, information overload, with communicating too little, that is, not getting the message out. And at the end of the day, we had the new digital security function with Alleima. So if you bear with me, I'm going to take you on a bit of a history journey as well. And some of you guys, you know where this is. I would say even every Swede would know what this is, but we're not all Swedes here. So this is actually the medieval town of Visby on the island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea. And it's around 200 kilometers south of here. And as you can see there, being in the middle of the Baltic Sea, it was, since the seas were the highway or the airlines or the arteries of communication and trade, as it still is to a great extent, but back then it was even more so. And the town of Visby were actually one of the most prosperous towns in all of the Baltic Sea area. It was so prosperous, so 92 churches was built outside of the city on Gotland. And that is, of course, wealth that spilled over. And what kept this city safe for such a long time? Well, it was the town wall. And the town wall, I think that's a wonderful analogy to the old perimeter paradigm in how you architect security and network security. And just as the perimeter is breached today by threat actors and by criminals, the perimeter of Visby also was breached. It was in 1525, and the North German town of Lübeck thought, enough is enough with that competitor of ours up on Gotland. Let's go there and try and break them. And they tried several times before, and they failed every time. The perimeter kept Visby safe. The wealth were still being gathered, and the wealth spilled over to the churches. But this time, they came with a 0 day. That was called gunpowder. So they had the sappers, the mercenaries, or maybe, how should I say, the APTs of the time, the APT as a service. They moved up to the town wall. They placed the charges of gunpowder. They lit the fuse. They ran off, and they blew up the wall. And those of you that go to Visby, you can go to the park there, Badande Vännernas trädgård, the garden of the bathing friends. I know it's a bit of a funny name, but you can still look at this place. And if you're really observant, you will even see that the fix that the townspeople did, the few that remained afterwards, it's not proper masonry. They just piled up the stones afterwards, so they didn't even have the money to fix the town wall properly. And just like Visby, Sandvik and many other organizations also suffered breaches. And WannaCry is, of course, one of them. You can go to the Wikipedia page for WannaCry, and you will see Sandvik is listed there as one of the victims. There are also other times when breaches happen that I cannot go into. But like many organizations, being for a long time, having a perimeter defense, 2 Class B networks, just routed on the inside, 9 internet egress points globally. That happened. And that's not to say that that is what Sandvik is now. That is what Sandvik was when WannaCry struck. Anyways, so we worked really hard trying to build an appropriate organization for the digital security function at Alleima. Our biggest concern in the beginning was to convince people that we needed to have an appropriate capability, which resulted in an appropriate budget, and so on and so forth. What you can see here, in my team I have one guy working with governance and compliance. I have 5 people, one service architect who is working with cyber defense, 4 service architects. 2 of those are here today. And on the identity and access management part of things, we have 1 service manager and 2 service architects. We also have, as you can see, a global team with dotted line resources. They are in Scranton, US, no pun intended, those of you that know Office, in Hallstahammar in Sweden, in Perth in Great Britain, and that's not Perth in Australia. We have Chomutov in Czech Republic, and we have Pune in India, and we have one in Kobe in Japan. So as you can see, it's a quite good team. But what you're missing there, of course, is operations, and more about that later. But to really iron out what we need to get in place to have the appropriate digital security posture, we follow this model. So we have the regulatory requirements, the actual laws that we have. We have the customer requirements, which often are the customer's regulatory requirements. We have executive management, because of course, all business is risk management. That's what they do. They are the ultimate responsible for this. And that's also how we acknowledge that and we get the buy-in from them. Unfortunately, we have the adversary threats. We have our PDCA cycle. You're very well familiar with the CIA triad that was actually invented, I think, in Project Blue Book. No, sorry, that's UFOs. In the Orange Book series in the 70s, when they, in the US, when they started to do computer security. We added safety and reliability. At the end of the day, our production can sometimes be dangerous if you are not mindful. And then privacy to take care of the data privacy laws of the world. And then, of course, there is a bit of an inflation with the terminology here. What kind of security do you want? There are lots of new things like IoT security and old things, physical security. And there you bolt on environmental security as well. We could probably have a long discussion about if cybersecurity should change place with information security, and I guess that is up to discussion. But this one comes from our friends at Compliance Forge. And instead of reinventing and making our own, we thought, let's follow that one. But to make this holistic, we try and capture the entire digital security part of it all, to make that sort of a catch-all phrase. And looking into some of the regulatory requirements we have, since we have those products that I showed you earlier that I got from our friends at marketing, we have all kinds of various, quite strict, some of them, framework that we need to satisfy for our customers. ITGC, that is the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. They have 13 IT controls. They are very labor intensive to prove that you actually do them. But that is so we are having an appropriate IT posture for maintaining the financials, both from an integrity point of view, but also from a communicative point of view. No one should know, unless those that are on the insider trading list, until everyone knows. NIS2, that is the new EU cyber regulation that is coming up. I'm a bit concerned myself that people are underestimating this, because it's quite clear, even for me as a layperson from a legal point of view, that it is sticky, it trickles down the supply chain. SWIFT, many big organizations, probably some of you guys as well, are using SWIFT to exchange money with the customers and the suppliers. GDPR, I guess everyone knows that. ITAR, and the next line, FAR, DFARS, ER, and CMMC, that's US laws that come into play when you are either making export-controlled products or you are a supplier for the Department of Defense. And they often come together. UNMPI, that is US Navy. Like I told you, we produce cooling coils for nuclear power plants, and we produce fuel rods, or actually the steel capsules of the fuel in the nuclear power plant. So I guess you can see where that is coming. CEA, that is a British Cyber Essentials accreditation. It's maybe not so interesting from an outside of the UK point of view, but it's, as I understand it, it's tied to insurances, and that you can have a cyber insurance if you're eligible, if you satisfy that. MLPS, China's cyber regulation. STP, non-sender, that's customs regulations. And then, of course, the last one there should probably have taken away the company name, but that's our property insurance company. And they of course, also have ideas about how we can reduce the risk for them, so on and so forth. But all of these that we just were at, that's standards, it's more or less defined. And now comes the tricky thing. It's customers that have their own bespoke requirements. And it's often a mix. And the problem here is not that they choose the wrong questions. The problem is rather that they're not, each and every customer of ours, they're not choosing the same good questions. They have an opinion. They are opinionated. So they mix and match a little bit, and it always becomes a manual thing to handle this. So this takes a lot of time. But you can see there, US medical company, consumer goods company, Japanese industrial manufacturer, car manufacturer. Yama, by the way, it's the Japanese Automotive Manufacturers Association, their cyber requirements. And TISAX is the same for the car industry in Europe. And just to bring home here, this is a very good slide, I think, to see how the requirements are a bit different. It is a core in the middle that are very similar, but there is not a single framework, not even the humongous American NIST SP 800-53. Not even in its high baseline is it covering all of ISO, all of critical security controls, and so on and so forth. So there is no catch everything regulatory framework. And as you can see, not even ISO 27002, it covers a pretty small part of this. So you need something bigger. And that is where our friends at Compliance Forge in the US, they have, this one I'm showing you here is an open source product. You can just go to Secure Controls Framework and download it for free. What it is, it's an enormous Excel file The rows are a little bit over 1,100 generalized controls, I guess you can say. And the columns are various regulatory frameworks. What I did here to make it a bit more illustrative is that I added GDPR, I added NIS2, I made a summary of those two together, and I did the same for SWIFT, ITAR. I mean, all of those are laws that we need to have. Some are scoped, some are not. And then I also added Common Cyber Essentials Accreditation and CMMC. You remember that US military stuff? Made a summary of that, and then I added some of the things that is interesting to see. So it's ISO 27000 series, a new one from last year, and it is an OT security standard, and also TSAX. So if we just take GDPR and NIS2, you see there that there is 59 controls from NIS2. There is 105 for GDPR. Some are the same though, so those two together is 143. So instead of me using my clever certifications and trying to be very, well, I know these kind of things, you can trust me, I'm certified, using my subjective will and saying these are the controls we should have, I actually have the controls here. It's much easier. There is no discussion. If we satisfy this, we're pretty good, aren't we? And so on. Add SWIFT and ITAR, we're up to 227 controls. And as you see, just adding in all of the other ones, it's going to be 452. That's quite a tall order, but if we have those requirements, that's what we need to do. And then, at the end of the day, what do we need to do to actually get this right? That, as I said, we only have architects and service managers and a GRC manager in my team. We don't have the operations. So looking a little bit of what we are supplying, you can see there that there is quite a big thing. There is a tall order on the GRC guy. He has a lot of deliveries to do. You can see also under cyber defense, where our friends at Integrity360, as they now is called, I see that the icon is still the old one I added, so they help us with the Security Operations Center. They run our EDR. They run, and that's set up in XDR mode. They have the email security for us, and they do the cyber forensics. We have another MSSP that does network authentication, remote access, and vulnerability management for us. And then we have a lot of other things that we run ourselves, more or less SaaS solutions. And we have some things that we are, thinking how we should place them in the future. I think one of the low-hanging fruits is security incident response. Right now we have an ad hoc solution. It's our architects, augmented, of course, by Integrity360, but that is one of the things we're looking to change. And another area is OT security. That is quite distinct. Finally, on the identity and access management part of things, we have, actually, I should have taken away one of the S's there. So it's a managed service provider who helps us with the directory services of the operations around the user management. So what helped us to set this up in time? And up until very recently, we haven't had a single breach. And the small breaches we've had, they have been very minimal, and they have been contained as they happened, more or less. Well, I would like to underline that we had a very brilliant team. We had huge luck and maybe some skill to be able to attract wonderful employees, superb consultants, And then I'm talking more like line consultants and the project team that enabled us with the change. But one of the most important things that helped us is, of course, our friends in the MSSP part. And to underline here, I would like to stress Integrity360. I mean, there are many MSSPs that can help with things, but one of the things that really, really helped us a lot was their flexibility. They understood that we weren't the average company that had while we have the legacy of 162 years, we didn't have the maturity because we were just started. The second thing that I also want to underline is, of course, what Gartner calls the cyber mesh architecture. Or if you go talk to our friends at Fortinet, that will be the security fabric. And we actually chose on purpose that as one of our key strategies to meet the deadline. We use the cyber mesh architecture and one vendor whenever possible. And then, when it wasn't possible, or if it wasn't good enough, then we went somewhere else and integrated that solution the best we could. A third thing that is quite close to my heart is the humble and supporting way. We have a mantra that says in Swedish, det ska vara lätt att göra rätt. But we say it with a non-cliche way. And it actually helps when you use that all the time, you actually build a nice culture that you're supportive. We don't want to be the police and perceived like that. And in English, that would of course be these ways should be the right way. And then one thing that many of our architects, and myself also with an architecture background, that is very hard to accept, but you need to learn, that is that all the things we bring in, the technology we bring in, it has features and capabilities, and we really want to put them in place. But it's not time, not for listing. We need to put it up on the to-do list. Document them as exceptions, keep them there so you can survive the audit, but you move on. If we wouldn't have done that, we would not have been ready in time for the listing. And that would be an utter failure, because then all the shareholder value would have been lost. So at the end of the day, in the end of August last year, when Sandvik was its own company, Alleima was its own company, if you would have put 1,000 crowns in each, and you would look 1 year later, the really, really funny thing is that both companies did really good. But Alleima returned more on that investment than Sandvik. So that, I think, is quite interesting. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for your time and also open for questions.
Thank you so much for sharing this journey, Robert.
Thank you.
And I look into the audience and see if there's any questions.
I think it can be the bear, right?
Might be.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, you think about that. I have a few questions for you. And you touched a bit upon this, Robert, but I would like to say you touched about the lessons learned. What would you say was the biggest lesson learned out of all of them?
Not all people will thrive in a situation like this where you need to change. I know there's a bit of a cliche, embrace change. But not to say that the people that don't like that we should just take them away, but we should make them comfortable enough to survive the journey, because it's those people we need when we're in the line. You need the people that love change, but you also need the people that, they have their service, they polish it, they make it good, shiny, square, perfect, simple to repeat, So I think finding those people, finding what drives them and how their mentality goes, and cushion them so they survive their change journey. I think that was a bit HR-y, but I think that is the thing that...
We're still humans after all. So
we are.
if we look at it on another angle, what would you say is the biggest surprise? What surprised you the most throughout the journey?
Yeah, that would beat Sandvik maybe. I mean, they didn't expect that, and many of us wouldn't expect that also, because SMT was seen as the sort of like the trouble child of Sandvik. We weren't giving as much shareholder value back then, but now when we're independent, have our appropriate organization, and can do what we want with our money, more or less, or what the shareholder wants, we really succeeded, I think.
And is there anything that you would have done differently with all the knowledge from doing this journey, and let's say you're going to do it once more? What would you have done differently?
I would say convince communication to give us a domain name earlier. They kept it for a long, long time, and then we had to do some things that are not so pretty. I mean, our internal domain is not called Alleima.com as it would have been. And it would have helped a lot if we could do that. But yeah, so that is one thing. The other thing, I think, is to let the architects be there earlier, so that we could make that time planning much more fact-based. Even though it was good, it could have been better.
And looking out to see if there's any questions from the audience. Gentleman over here.
Thank you. You seem to have a quite interesting setup for your project. So time was the essence, and it seems it wasn't cheap. So did you ask for the money, or did you get a big pile of money, and why? Were they scared from something, some bad experience?
Yeah, you're onto something. I mean, first of all, it was Sandvik investing in this from a shareholder value point of view. So the overall Alleima, the Verbia project, that was, of course, their investment. So that also enabled us to make a modern and new infrastructure, with that disclaimer I said earlier about not enabling everything. But where we had a misunderstanding was how high the security cost was. So the initial assumptions from the IT team was borderline a quarter of what we have now. So we had to fight quite a lot, and then we learned it's better to use inception and explanation. So we got the budget up to 4 times as much for this year that comes now. And I think the big thing there also is you need to enable their understanding, because security is pretty abstract for people that are not working with it full time, I think. They say, well, it's just firewalls and antivirus, right? Yeah, maybe. Thank you.
Any last questions? Then to summarize it, if someone out there is about to do this journey, what would be your advice?
Yeah, bring in the architects early. Understand that people are different and they need different incentives to either thrive, or if they are really maintainers, that they need to be cushioned through the process, because you need them after it's completed.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this. Robert, give him another big round of applause.